On today's Maker Mashup, we're reviewing the Two Trees Bluer Plus 3D printer. Welcome makers. On today's Maker Mashup, we are going to be reviewing the Two Trees Bluer Plus. Now, there are two models of this 3D printer. This is the Plus model, which has the larger build area and all of the really great extras on this printer. This printer has a 300 by 300 by 400 build area, and you can build some really large prints with it. This airplane here was printed in vase mode and didn't take very long at all, but very large and very spectacular, being able to print prints that big. And it uses the full build volume. This is a 300 millimeter circle, which fit perfectly on the print bed with just one little gotcha we'll talk about here in just a few minutes. So today we're going to be reviewing this printer, and I'm going to be going over its features through our standard review process. And then at the end, I'm going to be giving you my summary, and I'm going to give you a quick little mod for this 3D printer as well. So with all that said, let's get to work. Unboxing the printer, we find that everything is extremely well packed. And for this video, Steve from our Discord happened to stop by, and we opened up this 3D printer together. Opening the box, there looks to be a whale inside the printer, and upon further inspection, this is some sort of a purse to perhaps hold some of the 3D printer accessories. It's kind of small, but my wife and daughter immediately wanted this the moment they saw this. After removing the rest of the accessories, we pulled out the major upright portion of the 3D printer along with the carriage, and then finally the base. It all unpacked pretty quickly, and like most of these printers, it's going to assemble rather quick with only a couple of screws. We start by inserting the M5 screws into the base of the 3D printer and attaching that to the main upright portion. Once we have both sides complete, it's time to move on to the main carriage assembly. This goes rather quickly by installing two M3 screws into the carriage to hold it on. The spool holder then gets installed at the top by just attaching it with a couple of T-nuts and M3 screws. The wiring for this printer couldn't be easier. Simply attach this network-looking cable to the printer carriage and then the other half into the 3D printer base. After you put both of these in here, you're going to install one other wire, and that is just going to be a JST connector that connects the same way from the carriage to the main printer base. Once the cables are plugged in, you can use the included zip ties to tie these cables together to make it look a little bit neater. I really wish Two Trees would have included some cable wrap. I think it would have looked a lot nicer. And watch at the end of the video, I'm going to show you my solution for this, which I think is much improved. Once we have the wiring complete, we're going to turn to the back of the printer and tighten the lead screws onto the couplers. It just requires the bit driver here, and we tighten everything up and make sure it looks great, and we do that on both sides. Then last but not least, we need to remove these safety blocks. There are little blocks to keep things from moving around and shipping. There are one on each side, and you need to remove both before starting up the 3D printer. Now we need to get our print surface ready to print. I'm going to remove the protective packaging over the main print bed itself. And then once I've done that, I'm going to wipe it down with some 99% isopropyl alcohol. Make sure that surface is very clean. And then we're going to peel and then place very slowly the magnetic sticker base. Once I've got this in place, the PEI build sheet fits right on top and everything is ready to go. Now it's time to power up the printer, and we get the big blue whale right on the front. After we boot this up, we're going to go into our bed leveling and run the automatic bed leveling process. I'm really excited that this printer came with an ABL solution already baked in. Once we start the automatic bed leveling process, it's going to home the printer, and then after that it's going to read 12 different positions on your print bed. Once this process is complete, you're going to be prompted to use a manual bed leveling tool to adjust the Z offset from the bed leveling process. Once this is complete, everything is saved and you're ready to go for your 3D printer. All right, so let's give the assembly a rating for this printer. Overall, I think this was a tremendously simple setup. Couple of screws on the bottom, couple for the carriage, and then plugging those wires in was about as simple as it gets. Overall, I'm going to give the assembly of this printer a 9. So I had a little trouble getting the first test print done. The actual SD card did not contain in the root directory any test prints, and I did find a calibration cube that was included inside of the zip file with the directions and other documentation for the printer on the SD card. So while I was able to find it, one of the things that I like for a first test print is having that file right there in the root directory, because as a new 3D printer user, they may not know to go look at a zip file or something else for these test prints. So I found the only test print that they had, which was a calibration cube. Once I got that into the root directory, I was on my way printing the calibration cube. Because this printer had ABL already baked in, it worked really well to get that first layer stuck. And while I wasn't a fan of the brim that they had on this 3D print looks exceptionally well. It's very clean. I'm not seeing any Z-banding, and it looks really nice. This was not bad for a first print at all. I just wish they would have made it a little bit easier to get to. So now let's talk about all of the different features found in the Bluer Plus. Under the hood, we have an MKS Robin Nano version 1.2, and this has a 32-bit ARM Cortex M3 processor running at 72 megahertz. Now, I could not see the driver number on the step sticks themselves, but according to the documentation on Two Trees' website, it looks like these may be TMC2209. Regardless of the type of drivers inside, this 3D printer is entirely silent. As I mentioned earlier, this is one of the few 3D printers I've reviewed that came with a PEI sheet, which I really like and I think was a nice inclusion for this printer. Two Trees also added a BMG style geared extruder, and you can see there that we've also got an aluminum casted filament runout sensor. The carriage is your typical V-rollers in some V-slotted aluminum extrusion. This works usually pretty well, and it's a traditional Bowden setup. Two Trees also has a proprietary tensioning system which maintains tension across the two 2040 uprights for the carriage and the carriage gantry. This is a nice addition because you won't have to adjust some off-camber bolts in order to make this connection secure. Two Trees has done that for you already. They've also included a handy tensioner on the side, so the X-axis belt tension can be adjusted easily, and there is some manual ones on the front that require you to loosen some bolts, but generally speaking, those don't need to be modified as they come pretty tight from the factory. The full color touchscreen is a nice addition, but I found when printing via USB like I am here, there was no status display that I could get to show the heat and temperature of the printer along with its current position, which I found a bit odd. Another strange feature is the spool holder. It's a very, very short spool holder, and you can see I've got a 250-gram reel here that is taking almost half of the space. And I had filament from Atomic Filament that did not fit on this spool. So this spool holder, while really short, is odd when there's so much longer ones on every other 3D printer I've ever reviewed. So wasn't sure what they were going for here, but it does hold most reels. I love the fact this 3D printer has a dual Z axis and that they're interconnected. This will keep the entire gantry level, so that way you don't have to re-level it from moving your 3D printer or any other activities. The heat bed wires are attached securely, and this black block applies some really great relief to that cable. It's actually soldered fairly underneath the 3D printer bed, and it's screwed directly to it. So this provides really good relief compared to other printers I've seen. I think Two Trees also went the extra mile, covering up the stepper here, but they also added a lot of very small features, which I think were a thoughtful design. For example, the main board is accessible directly from the top of the printer. You don't have to pull off the bottom of the case. I also like the fact that they did all of this wiring where you can simply attach 3 different wires and your printer is up and running. So that made everything really simple. Also, on the side of the printer, we have the USB port and a micro SD slot. It would have been nice to have a full-size SD card, but I think the location here puts this out of the way and you're not going to snap off an SD card or anything else sticking out of the printer. So let's talk about the 3D print quality. You can see here this Benchy looks pretty good. I'm not seeing a lot of banding. It is a pretty clean looking print and I'm seeing good overhangs and cooling. A little bit of stringing, but that can be tweaked in the slicer settings. Here we have the Fertility Idol from Raiders of the Lost Ark, and this is a really neat print that I printed at 150% to go ahead and show some of the large prints that you can print on this printer. And you can see the detail and quality of this print really does look spectacular. I was very happy with how this print came out. Here we have a vase mode rocket. This is 400 millimeters tall, testing the full height of the printer, and it did extremely well with this print. I also printed this really impressive dragon, which does not require any supports, and I printed this in the Layer Fuse Cherry Cosmos. It's a new filament that is coming to the Layer Fuse store, and I'll have links for this down in the description. These cherries really came out looking nice, and I was really happy with the job that this printer did on such fine detail of the stem. The only print problem I had was this large print was just a little bit off the build plate, but you should be able to fix this with M428, and I've included a card at the top on how to fix that. Okay, so let's give the Bluer Plus a rating here. Features and quality. I think overall this is a great solid build and design. I think it works really well. Features, there are just tons of features in this printer. Everything from ABL to geared extruders. You can't really think of too many other upgrades for this printer that you would want to do. However, I do have to say that there were a few things that were a bit quirky with this printer. One of them being the spool holder. I didn't think that I should have a spool that doesn't fit on the spool holder. So that was pretty minor. But overall, I think that this printer has a lot of really great features. And with that, I'm going to rate this a 9. Let's talk about the first print. That could have gone flawlessly with the ABL, but the fact that there wasn't a sample file in the root directory and I had to go find one in a zip file really didn't give this a 10, but the quality of the print was perfect, so I'm going to go ahead and give that a 9. Now let's talk about the print quality overall. I think the prints on this went really well. I had a little bit of stringing, but I think that's slicer settings, and I'm also going to give the print quality of this printer a 9. Alright, so let's talk about upgradability. I do like the fact that it is using an MKS Robin, and that is a pretty standard board footprint, and I like the fact that it is so accessible right at the top. If you needed to do an upgrade, you don't have to tear apart the whole printer. Things are right there in front. However, it is a little bit harder to access, and the proprietary cabling on this printer does make it a little bit more difficult should you want to change or modify components. So for that, I'm going to give the upgradability a 9. Alright, let's talk about the class and overall rating of this printer. This printer, I feel, best fits a tool category. There's no need to tinker with it. There's no need to upgrade it. With very few exceptions, this printer would serve any maker or 3D printer enthusiast out of the gate for many years without having to mess with anything. So I'm going to put this into the tool category, but you definitely could use it to tinker as well. Now, the overall rating of this printer is a 9, and that is because this printer really does almost everything you could ever want it to do out of the box. It's also a large format printer, so it has got a very large size, allowing you to print just about anything you could ever want. And I've been really happy with this printer, and I would have no problem buying another for my shop, and I think it is an absolute great printer. So the overall rating, a 9. Okay, so as you can see, this is a really well-class 3D printer. It only runs about $350 for this printer, where you're going to spend for something smaller like an Ender 3V2, that's going to cost you $260, $275, depending on where you buy it. So for roughly $100 more, you could get a well-class printer like this one. Now, this printer here has the 300 by 300 by 400 build area. Something like an Ender 3V2 is much smaller. So you're getting a much bigger class of printer for just a little bit more, but there's so many more extras like the geared extruder on this, the filament runout sensor. I really like the touch screen on this. This was really nice. But it's also got dual Z's on this. So your print quality is going to be much better with a printer like this for just a little bit more budget. So as you can tell already, I am a big fan of this printer. And a matter of fact, I would have no problem buying a second one of these for my shop. I think it is a really great quality printer. They really pulled out a lot of the stops. They made this printer look really more complete. They covered up like the second stepper over there, so you can see that stepper's all covered up. All the other steppers are contained within the body. And really, when you look at this printer overall, it does have a really nice look to it. The other thing that I really liked about this printer is that it came with a PEI build sheet. Now, you've heard me talk about glass beds on a lot of other 3D printers. This is a magnetic base. You can pull that off. You can put a piece of glass on there if you wanted to print something like PETG. But the fact that they gave you a PEI bed and all of these other features, I just don't know that you could find a better bang for the buck. In my opinion, this outclasses things like the Sidewinder X1. This is much better of a printer in my opinion. And it's got a 32-bit mainboard in it. So the features just go on. And we covered a lot of that in the video. So in my opinion, I'd have no problem buying this printer. I think it's a great printer for somebody that is either new at 3D printing or somebody that is a seasoned veteran. There's certainly a lot that this printer has to offer. Okay, so as promised, I'm going to show you a really quick mod to this printer to make it look a lot better than what it already looks like, which is really good. I think Two Trees definitely missed with the wiring here. I think the wiring was great that they made it easy to hook up, but the fact that they just sent you zip ties, I really didn't like it. So you could consider this the one upgrade I think I would make to this printer just to finish it off and make it look really nice. So what we're going to do here is we're going to put some braided cable wrap on this, and I'm going to do that super quickly. And the really nice thing about that is that Two Trees did make it so that way you could put cable wrap on this any way that you wanted and really finish off this printer because those connections are so easy to manage. So let's go ahead and we're going to pull this off and do the cable wrap. And I'm going to show you that right now. And then after that, we'll wrap up today's video. All right, so the first step here is going to be removing these cables back from the base. That should only take a second here. Be careful when removing the JST connectors so you don't pull the wires out of the connector itself. All right, so once we have those disconnected, we're just going to take a piece of this braided cable wrap and then we're going to slide these in. And you're going to have to do one and then the other and then just inch it through the cable wrap. Once we have everything through, we're just going to take a zip tie and finish this end off. Once we have that done, we just need to replace our cables. Make sure that you're mindful of the right ones are being plugged back into the correct slot. But after that, we're just going to go ahead and plug this back in and our wiring job is complete. As you can see, adding this cable wrap really does finish off this look. And I like the blue and black braid as it does match the printer and their design. So this is a pretty simple modification that you're able to do. And I'll put a link down in the description for the cable wrap that I used. Okay, so as you can see, that cable wrap really does finish off the look of this 3D printer. And Two Trees, I would definitely recommend including some cable wrap like that versus the zip ties. It looks so much more finished. And I think for an end user, it makes their printer look just that much more impressive. And I was really happy with this printer. I think that just really finishes the look of your printer. Now, I've got links in the description for that cable wrap and also for this layer fuse Cherry Cosmos filament. It's a new filament layer fuse is going to be producing. I have links for that down in the description. I think it is really an amazing looking filament, and I can't wait to use it on more 3D prints. So with that is going to bring the end of today's video. If you enjoyed it, make sure you mash that like button, and don't forget to share and subscribe so you don't miss any of my upcoming videos. If you'd like to help support the channel and start to see the new series that I'm putting together for patrons called Inside the Mashup, you can go ahead and check out the link to our Patreon page. Insiders get that new series, and I'm producing that approximately every week, which kind of gives you a little bit of background into what are the projects that I'm currently working on before they hit the main YouTube channel. So with all that, I want to say thanks again for watching, and we'll see you all next time.